The volcano on Eth had been quiet for 200 years. Then it woke up angry. The eruption happened so fast that 17,000 people got trapped under ash and broken buildings before anyone could evacuate. The ash was hot enough to burn through metal, and it kept falling like deadly snow. Commander is stood on her ship above the planet, watching the disaster unfold on her screens. She had seen bad situations before. She had commanded rescue operations for 30 years across a dozen worlds. But this one was worse than most. The ash was still falling, the ground was still shaking, and thousands of people were buried alive. She sent down her teams immediately. The went first because their shells could handle the heat. The followed because they could breathe in thin air. The came last, massive and strong enough to lift the heavy debris that crushed the buildings. Every species in the Galactic Disaster Relief Coalition had something special that made them good at rescue work. Is watched her teams work in careful rotations, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. When their body monitors showed exhaustion, she pulled them back. When their equipment started to fail, she replaced them with fresh teams. This was how rescue work was supposed to go. Safe, methodical, professional. After 14 hours, they had saved 400 people. The computer predicted they might save 2,000 more before the window closed and the rest would be lost. It was a good number. Not everyone could be saved. Is had learned to accept that long ago. Then the human ship appeared in orbit. Is had heard about humans. Earth had just joined the coalition 6 months ago on a trial basis. Nobody expected much from them. They were small and soft with no natural armor or special abilities. They seemed fragile compared to most galactic species. She had been curious about them but not optimistic. 30 humans came down in a transport shuttle. They wore thick environment suits that looked clumsy and heavy. Their leader, a woman named Lieutenant Maria Santos, contacted Is directly. "We're here to work, Commander," Santos said. Her voice was calm and professional. "Where do you need us?" Is looked at the deployment map. Most of the easy rescues were done. The remaining survivors were in difficult locations. She assigned the humans to Sector 7, a residential area where the buildings had collapsed into soft soil. It was dangerous because the ground might give way at any moment, but she figured the humans would work there for a few hours, save whoever they could reach easily, and then request rotation like everyone else. She checked on them after 4 hours. They were still digging. After 8 hours, she checked again, still digging. After 12 hours, she started to worry. She pulled up their medical data and felt a spike of alarm. Their heart rates were elevated. Their body temperatures were too high. The readings showed muscle damage and dehydration. By every standard the coalition used, these humans should have collapsed hours ago. Lieutenant Santos is called directly. "Your team needs to rotate out. Your medical readings are in the critical zone." Through the helmet camera Is watched Santos pull a small child from under a broken wall. The human's hands were shaking badly. Blood seeped through torn gloves, but her voice stayed steady. "Commander, we can hear people under the rubble here. Your sensors must pick them up too. Can you confirm survivors in Subsector 7 Delta?" Is checked her screens. Confirmed. 17 life signs detected. But Lieutenant, my regular teams will reach that location in approximately 8 hours. You need medical attention now. "The building structure is failing," Santos replied. She was already moving toward the new location, and her team followed without needing orders. "Those people don't have 8 hours. We need cutting equipment and support beams." "Lieutenant, you need rest and medical treatment." "What we need is to get those people out alive. Please, Commander, the equipment." Is hesitated. Every protocol said to pull the humans back. Every regulation warned against allowing rescue workers to endanger themselves. But 17 people were going to die if someone didn't reach them soon. Her other teams were stretched thin across the disaster zone. She authorized the equipment drop. 4 hours later, all 17 survivors were out safely. The humans had crawled into spaces too small for the, worked in toxic fumes that even they avoided, and kept digging even when their tools broke and they had to use their bare hands. They worked until the last person was safe. Then three of them collapsed at the same time. Is scrambled medical teams to the location. The humans were in bad shape. Their bodies had been pushed far beyond safe limits. Most species would have died from that level of physical trauma, but the humans were still conscious, still trying to coordinate equipment checks and make sure nothing was left behind. Santos refused treatment until her collapsed teammates were being cared for. She stayed on her feet through what should have been complete system failure, making sure all the equipment was accounted for and all the survivors were transported to medical facilities. Only when everything was done did she let the medics put her on a stretcher. Is came down to the surface to see the human team before they were evacuated. Santos looked terrible. Her face was gray with exhaustion, and she could barely keep her eyes open, but she still managed a small smile when Is approached. Why? Is asked. The question had been bothering her for hours. Why didn't you stop? You knew you were damaging yourselves. You had to know. Santos's smile got a little wider, though her eyes were starting to close. Because they needed us, Commander. That's enough reason. Then she passed out. The medical team took all 30 humans back to the ship for treatment. Is returned to orbit and wrote her report in a daze. She had never seen anything like what the humans had done. They had worked for 28 hours straight in lethal conditions. They had pushed their bodies beyond any reasonable limit. And they had done it without hesitation, without complaint, without asking for anything except the tools to do the job. Her final count showed that the humans had personally rescued 143 people, more than any other team, more than should have been possible for such a small group. Is saved the medical data and the helmet camera footage. Something told her this wouldn't be the last time humans surprised the galaxy, and she wanted proof of what she had witnessed. Because the humans had shown her something she thought she understood but had never truly seen before. They had shown her what it meant to refuse to give up, to keep working when every logical calculation said to stop, to push forward when your body was breaking down because someone, somewhere, needed help. The rest of the rescue operation continued for 3 more days. Is's team saved another 1,800 people using the careful, methodical approach that had worked for 3,000 years. It was efficient and professional and by the book. But Is kept thinking about those humans digging with bleeding hands because they could hear voices under the rubble. She kept thinking about Santos, barely conscious, still making sure her people were safe before accepting help. She had commanded rescue operations across dozens of worlds. She had worked with the best teams in the galaxy, but she had never seen anyone work like the humans worked. And she suspected the galaxy was about to learn something new about what rescue work could be. The incident at Eth should have been unusual, a one-time event where circumstances pushed humans beyond normal limits. Instead, it became a pattern that repeated across the galaxy. 6 months later, massive floods hit the planet. 3 days of rain turned the lowlands into a vast ocean. A hospital got caught in the rising water, and 200 patients needed evacuation. The coalition sent rescue boats and flying transports. It should have been a straightforward operation. Then the dam broke upstream. A wall of water 20 feet high came roaring down the valley toward the hospital. The other rescue teams calculated they had maybe 30 minutes to get out before the wave hit. They loaded who they could and left. It was the logical decision. Better to save some than lose everyone, including the rescuers. The human team stayed. They worked for 37 hours straight in neck-deep water, moving patients who couldn't walk, rigging emergency flotation devices from whatever materials they could find, carrying people up to the roof when the lower floors flooded. They didn't leave until every single patient was evacuated to high ground. When asked why they stayed when everyone else left, the human team leader said simply, "They were patients. They couldn't leave on their own. Someone had to stay." 3 weeks after that, an avalanche buried a research station on the ice world of. The station was deep under the snow, and the temperature outside was cold enough to freeze most species solid in minutes. They sent their best cold weather teams, but even they struggled in those conditions. The humans went in anyway. They wore thermal suits that kept them alive but barely. They dug through ice and snow in temperatures that would kill them in an hour without the suits. When their equipment froze and stopped working, they kept digging with hand tools. When those broke, they used pieces of metal. When those failed, they used their gloved hands. They pulled 47 researchers out of that frozen tomb. 3 humans got severe frostbite. 1 nearly died from hypothermia, but all 47 researchers survived. The pattern was clear. The humans pushed themselves harder than any other species. They worked longer hours. They took bigger risks. They refused to leave anyone behind even when leaving was the smart choice. The Coalition Council called an emergency meeting to discuss what they were now calling the human problem. Representative of the spoke first. His voice carried the clicking frustration of his species. They violate every safety protocol we have established over 3,000 years. They push themselves to the point of permanent injury. They take risks that no rational being would take. We cannot allow this to continue. Cannot allow what to continue. Is, now promoted to Director of Field Operations, brought up the statistics she had been tracking. Since we integrated humans into our disaster teams, our rescue success rates have increased by 43%. Response times are down 37%. We are saving more lives than ever before. At what cost? Demanded. Human medical expenses have increased by 600%. We are repairing the damage they do to themselves in every operation. This is not sustainable. They save lives that would otherwise be lost, is countered. They reach people no one else can reach because they're willing to go where no one else will go. Because they are willing to destroy themselves, said. This is not bravery, this is madness. Ambassador of the raised a tendril for attention. Her thought patterns pulsed with calm consideration. Perhaps we are asking the wrong question. We should not ask whether humans should do this work. We should ask why they do it at all. The council chamber went quiet. I have studied human psychology extensively since they joined the coalition, continued. Humans possess something they call empathy. It is more than just understanding another being's pain. They actually feel it themselves as if it were their own. When they know someone is suffering, they experience a reflection of that suffering. They cannot rest while others are in danger because to them, it is not abstract. It is personal. You mean they feel the pain of those they rescue? Another representative asked. Yes, and that pain drives them forward when logic would tell them to stop. It is both their greatest strength and their greatest vulnerability. Representative Al, speaking for the massive species, rumbled thoughtfully. Then we are exploiting them. They cannot help their nature, and we are using that nature to accomplish dangerous rescues. There is honor in what they do, but also tragedy in what it costs them. The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humans should be restricted to safer rescue operations. Others insisted that humans should be allowed to volunteer for dangerous work if they chose. A few suggested that humanity should be expelled from the coalition entirely for their own protection. Finally, it stood to speak. I have worked with humans for 6 months now. I have watched them save lives that every calculation said were lost. I have seen them refuse to give up when giving up was logical, and I have carried their broken bodies to medical bays more times than I can count. She paused, looking around the council chamber. But I have also asked them if they want to stop. Every single human I have asked has said no. They know the risks. They understand what they are doing to themselves. And they choose to do it anyway. That does not make it right, objected. No is agreed. But it makes it their choice. We can support them better. We can provide better medical care, better equipment, better protocols. But we cannot take away their choice to help, and we should not punish them for being willing to do what others cannot. The vote took 3 days. In the end, the decision was unprecedented. The coalition would establish dedicated human rapid response teams with enhanced medical support and recovery facilities. Humans would be allowed to volunteer for the most dangerous rescue operations, but only with proper oversight and mandatory health monitoring. Commander Maria Santos, fully recovered from ETH, was promoted to head of human operations. She stood before the council to speak for her species. "We appreciate your concern," Santos began. "We know we push ourselves hard. We know we take risks, but you need to understand where we come from." She displayed images from Earth's history: firefighters running into burning buildings, volunteers pulling strangers from floods, medical workers treating plague victims until they collapsed from exhaustion. "This is what humans do," Santos continued. "We have spent our entire history running toward danger when everyone else runs away, not because we're fearless, we're terrified, but we're more afraid of what happens if we don't try. You see self-destruction. We see Tuesday. This is normal for us. And now we get to do it among the stars for species who would do the same for us if they could." She looked around the council chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. "All we ask is that you let us work, trust us to know our limits and catch us when we fall, because we will fall, but we'll make sure everyone else is safe first." The vote was unanimous. The humans would stay. Terminus Station was a miracle of engineering. It orbited a neutron star in perfect balance, housing 12,000 people from 47 different species. The station's gravitational stabilizers kept it safe from the immense forces that could tear it apart. Then the stabilizers failed. The station began falling toward the neutron star in a slow spiral. Physics gave them 72 hours before tidal forces would rip the station to pieces. Plenty of time for an organized evacuation. The coalition mobilized dozens of ships to transport people to safety. Then the secondary reactor exploded. The explosion killed the command crew instantly. It knocked out primary communications. Worse, it flooded multiple sections with lethal radiation. Bulkheads sealed automatically, trapping thousands of people in isolated sections with limited life support. The 72-hour window collapsed to 30 hours, maybe less. Commander Santos arrived with 300 human volunteers to find Director is coordinating the largest disaster response in coalition history. 40 ships surrounded the station. 2,000 rescue workers were preparing to go inside. The situation was organized chaos. "Show me the worst areas," Santos said immediately. Is brought up the holographic display. Multiple sections were highlighted in red. These areas are cut off. The corridors leading to them have collapsed or are filled with radiation. We can reach maybe half the station's population. The rest—" She didn't finish the sentence. Santos studied the map in silence. Her team leaders gathered around, already running calculations on their personal devices. Their faces were grim but determined. "How much time before the furthest sections breach?" Santos asked. 3 hours, maybe 3.5. But it would take 4 hours to reach them through the damaged corridors, even if we had radiation-proof teams. "We can reach them." Is turned to look at the human commander. "Santos, I will not order your people to certain death." "You're not ordering, we're volunteering, but we need everything you have. Every radiation suit, every cutting torch, every medical team on standby, and we need it now." What happened next would be studied in military academies for decades. The humans split into specialized teams. Speed teams stripped down to light equipment and raced through the damaged corridors. Heavy teams wore triple-layered radiation suits that made them slow, but gave them precious minutes in lethal environments. Medical teams set up triage stations at every junction, ready to treat survivors and their own teammates who would inevitably push too far. Santos herself led a team to the deepest section, where 300 people were trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead. Radiation levels they were climbing toward instantly lethal. They had 40 minutes before the station's spiral would tear that section open to space. Is watched through Santos's helmet camera as the humans worked with desperate precision. They cut through the bulkhead with plasma torches while their radiation alarms screamed. The first operator's hands started shaking from radiation poisoning after 2 minutes. He stepped back without a word, and another human took his place. When that one collapsed, a third stepped forward. Commander Santos, your radiation exposure is critical, is warned. You must withdraw immediately. 60 seconds. We're through in 60 seconds. Santos's voice was steady even though her medical readouts showed organ damage beginning. Her body was literally starting to break down at the cellular level. Have medical teams ready. We'll need immediate treatment. They breached the bulkhead with 43 seconds to spare. The evacuation of 300 people took 8 minutes. 8 minutes while the station groaned and twisted around them. 8 minutes while radiation counters maxed out their readings. 8 minutes while human rescuers carried those who couldn't walk and guided those who could through corridors that should have paralyzed anyone with terror. Santos was the last one out. She physically pushed the final survivor into a transport pod before her legs gave out. All across the station, similar scenes played out. Humans working in impossible conditions, pushing through radiation that would kill them in hours, digging through collapsed corridors, carrying survivors on their backs. 47 humans suffered severe radiation poisoning. 12 had catastrophic injuries. All of them survived, but only because the Coalition's best medical technology could repair damage that would have been fatal weeks earlier. When it reached Santos in the medical bay, the human was unconscious, her body being reconstructed at the cellular level by machines that were basically performing miracles. All around her, other humans lay in similar conditions, but every single one would live. It sat beside Santos's bed and waited. It took 6 hours before the human commander opened her eyes. All 12,000 evacuated, it said quietly. 0 casualties. The station breached 17 minutes after the last transport cleared. Santos managed a weak nod. Good, that's good. You nearly died. Several of your people nearly died. All of you will spend weeks in recovery. But we didn't die, and neither did they. Was it worth it, nearly dying for strangers? Santos managed a small smile. Director, they weren't strangers. They were people who needed help. That's all that matters. Iz was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the council has made a decision. They're creating a new division called Extreme Response Operations. Human-led, human-staffed for situations where conventional approaches will fail. They want you to command it. Will we have the resources we need? The authority to do what must be done? Yes, and the medical support to keep you alive while you do it. Santos's smile grew wider. Then we accept. But Director, you should understand something. We're not special. We're not superhuman or naturally heroic. We're just human. This is what we do. We see someone who needs help and we help. We don't run the calculations or weigh the risks. We just act. I know, Iz replied. That's exactly why the galaxy needs you. News of what happened at Terminus Station spread across the Coalition within days. 12,000 survivors meant 12,000 families who had their loved ones back. 47 species owed their members' lives to the humans who had refused to leave anyone behind. The galaxy began to understand what humanity brought to the stars. Not advanced weapons or superior technology, but something more fundamental. A principle that seemed simple but was revolutionary in practice. No one gets left behind. Not while we can still stand. Not while we can still breathe. Not while there's anyone left to save. The Galactic Disaster Relief Coalition would never be the same. Other species began adopting human training methods, learning to push a little harder, work a little longer. But they also learned to support each other better, to have medical teams ready to catch the ones who fell. Because humans work until they collapse, and somehow, even after collapsing, they find a way to keep working. Not because they're superhuman, but because they're human. And that, the galaxy was learning, made all the difference.